So welcome everybody to the February 2022 edition of Streets for All Happy Hour. We are so excited and honored to have Stephanie Wiggins, the new CEO of Metro, with us today. And before we get to our conversation with Stephanie, we're going to give you an update on some state measures that we're tracking, introduce a very exciting ballot measure we are running this year, give you an update on our Destruction for Nada campaign, talk a little bit about the Svoboda Pass, a few wins of the month, and we'll get to our conversation with Stephanie. Our icebreaker this time is if you could wave a wand and create a new rail or BRT line anywhere in LA County, where would it be? So I'm going to kick it over to Bubba to give us an update on state measures.
Hey everybody, and thanks Michael. I think if I could wave a wand and create a BRT line, it would definitely be Venice, since it spans the whole city. And I'd wave another wand and get 5-minute headways. So at Streets for All, we have a state legislation team, and we've been hard at work trying to get more involved in the beginning stages of authoring great legislation that's going to move us forward from a transportation perspective. So we, last happy hour, we talked about a bunch of legislative ideas that we were pushing with some allies in state government, and this is that list. And a lot of great ideas in here, and we're actually very pleased that if you go to the next slide, we actually have a lot of bills that are coming out of this session that are either being authored or in the process of potentially being authored, and we're really excited about them. So some of the ones I want to highlight here: standardizing leading pedestrian intervals. So when the pedestrian signal turns or allows pedestrians before the lights turn green, basically making that standard in all cities in California. Speed safety cameras to ensure that it's specifically around school zones. Prohibiting sharrows as bike infrastructure, so making sure we have more than just a sharrow on a street, and that would not qualify as bike infrastructure. So that would incentivize cities hopefully to build class 1 and class 2 and class 4 bike lanes. Stopping highway and freeway widenings in underserved communities. That's a bill that's being authored by Representative Garcia. And parking requirements reform, we have good word that that's going to be coming back. And even the bill to legalize the Idaho safety stop, so cyclists using stop signs as yield signs, is coming back too. And we're really excited to see that too, because the governor vetoed it in the last session. And a tax rebate for being car free. This one we're still trying to find a home for, an author for, but we're really excited about the prospect of being able to give a similar type of rebate to people for not even owning a car, similar to how we do electric cars. And prohibiting bicycle license mandates. So a lot of cities still require you to have a bicycle license. And often, that enforcement will target people of color or unhoused folks. So we're excited to finally do away with that requirement on a state level. And then mandating complete streets policies in general plan updates. So this is one that we really had a huge hand in authoring with Senator Portantino's office that we're really excited about. These are some of the bills that we're tracking right now. And if you want to be a part of the state legislation team and you want to get more involved, please do go to streetsforall.org/get-involved and volunteer with us. This is just, we're a group of passionate, excited folks who really want to see change in LA County. So we'd love to have you on board, and you can go to that URL right there to get involved. And we have a great merch store too, with a bunch of great stuff for sale that all the proceeds go to transportation justice in LA County. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Bubba. If I could wave a wand, I think my BRT, or ideally rail, would be up Lincoln, connecting the west side to the airport. That is a very dangerous stretch to walk or bike on. It's always congested with cars. It'd be great to have mass transit. So I'm so excited to tell everybody about Healthy Streets LA. This is a City of Los Angeles ballot measure that will be on the November ballot. So when we get the signatures we need, it makes everybody happy. As you can see, there's a happy car, happy bus, someone riding a bike, someone in a wheelchair, kid playing in the street, someone walking their dog, pushing a stroller, and a tree. And essentially what it would do is force the city to follow its own plan, which shouldn't be controversial. They would just have to follow their own plan. If on the left, you see a map of LA's high injury network. These are the 6% of streets that cause the majority of injuries and deaths in the city of Los Angeles. On the right, you see that LA's mobility plan, full of bus lanes and bike lanes and a lot of pedestrian improvements. And if you look at these, they're actually pretty similar. So implementing the mobility plan would save lives and make LA much more multimodal, but we're completely failing. The city has implemented 3% of its plan in 7 years. So it's time for a different approach. Our approach is a ordinance that when the city repaves a street, it's a totally blank canvas. It's a great opportunity to stripe down bus lanes and bike lanes, essentially for free, because you got to restripe the street anyway. And that would happen automatically. The city would have to do that anytime they repave a street. If this doesn't happen and we go back to the status quo, we're just going to keep repaving and restriping most streets without implementing the intended bus and bike lanes. So we have a website, healthystreetsla.com. Maybe one of my colleagues could put it in the chat. You can sign up to sign the petition. You can sign up to volunteer to help us collect signatures. We need to collect 65,000 signatures from City of LA registered voters by May 27th. This slide is actually out of date. As of 2 hours ago, we have permission from the city to start collecting signatures. So we are starting to collect signatures today. Anyone can sign that's a registered City of LA voter, and anyone, whether they're in the City of LA or not, can volunteer and help the cause. So if you could think about who you know, if you could go and sign up to volunteer or sign right now, please follow that link in the chat and do so. Help us make history. This would change everything. It would change the conversation from should we put in a bus lane, should we put in a bike lane and follow the mobility plan, to we legally have to put in bus and bike lanes. What do we want to take away from other uses on the street to make room for these things? So really could use your help, and this could be a game changer in our city. And in case you can't tell, I'm very excited about it. I'm going to pass it over to Josh to give you an update on Destruction for Nada.
Thank you, Michael. If I could wave a wand and add a BRT line, I would probably throw a BRT down Atlantic on the east side. There's not a lot of good north-south connections, so you could have something running from South Pasadena down to the Green Line. If you're not familiar, Destruction for Nada is a coalition effort to stop all freeway widening projects in LA County. Just a quick update is that Assemblymember Garcia has recently released a bill which is going to stop all funding or permitting of freeway expansions in California in lower income or high pollution areas. So this would help kill local projects, or at least help put friction on local projects like the 5 or the 605 or the 710 in LA. So we're super excited to work with her and the coalition and make sure this thing gets passed and gets through as a bill. I'm going to toss it over to Kyle to talk about the Sepulveda Pass.
Thanks, Josh. I think if I could put a BRT or rail line anywhere in the city, it would be to connect. It would actually be extending this future Sepulveda Pass project down all the way to LAX and then all the way to Long Beach. So looking far ahead. So I'm here to talk about just that. So as many of you know, we are actively rallying support for this project, and we want to see it done in a particular way. That's for us, that's no monorail, and yes to a UCLA stop directly on campus. We received a resounding response from those of you who agreed back in December to our call to action. And you even added a lot of your own personal reasons and anecdotes. So thank you to everybody who got their comments in the Metro. And we want to highlight that the last opportunity to do so is February 11th, this Friday. This is the official public comment deadline. So follow the link as you see on the screen and get all of your feedback in for this project. We know it makes a difference to Metro to hear from you directly. And now I'll pass it over to Katrina.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm here to talk to you all about wins of the month, but first, if I could have my dream new transit line, it would probably be a heavy rail subway underneath Vermont for the entire length. It's an important north-south corridor. It's an extremely busy bus route, and it sorely needs a little help. So I'm here to talk to you about a couple ones of the month. First is our campaign in partnership with the Baldwin Hills Conservancy, working on encouraging LA County Parks and Rec to open 2 pedestrian and bike gates to Kenneth Hahn State Recreation Area. This is, of course, a very big park in sort of the southwestern part of LA County, an area that's otherwise rather park poor. And this will go a long way towards promoting park access and environmental justice. And additionally, we worked on a campaign in conjunction with, next slide. In conjunction with Abundant Housing LA.
Google Slides is acting up.
There we
There
go.
we go. Apologies.
Encouraging Santa Monica residents to write into their city council in support of replacing parking structure 3 in downtown Santa Monica with a supportive and affordable housing complex. Something else that's also sorely needed in this part of the county. And as of a couple weeks ago, the city picked a developer and it's set to be demolished next week, pending ongoing litigation. And next I'll turn it over to Adrienne.
Thank you so much, Katrina. My dream BRT line, to kind of echo what you had said, would be Vermont as well. I am a longtime Koreatown resident, and I personally see how badly we need BRT or some kind of rail that goes directly down Vermont throughout the entire length of it. And it broke my heart a couple weeks ago to see that a portion of Vermont was repaved from Beverly to 3rd Street, and it was striped with the same configuration. And that was disappointing to see that. Anyway, I'm going to tell you all about the Lincoln Fast Forward project. This is a really cool project that would make Lincoln Boulevard on the west side more pedestrian and bike friendly. Right now, it's a really dangerous street on the high injury network, but the Lincoln Fast Forward project would provide 5 pedestrian crosswalks with signals and a peak hour bus lane on Lincoln Avenue between Commonwealth and Venice Boulevard. And we were able to get Caltrans to go down to 10-foot lanes instead of their standard 11 feet. And that is a really cool thing because that opened up the possibility of bus lanes on both sides of Lincoln. Prior to that, with the 11-foot lane configurations, there was only room for one side of the street to have a bus lane. We did a call to action for the last community meeting, which was on January 25th. We had a really great showing for people in support of this project. So I want to thank you all for coming out to that and showing your support to LADOT and CD11. Thank you all so much for showing up and writing in. Now I'm going to toss it over to Michael to talk about the Beverly Hills bike lanes.
Thanks, Adrian. So Beverly Hills adopted a complete streets plan last year. They have not been known usually to be the most friendly multimodal city, but those green bike lanes got painted on Santa Monica Boulevard a couple years ago, and now they're installing mostly a Class 2 facility on Doheny for the entire stretch, which is exciting. Some of it has sharrows. There's some not great things, but most of it's great. They also just voted to put a bike lane on San Vicente Boulevard near the future Purple Line stop. So some progress coming out of Beverly Hills. So quick preview for next month. We're excited to have County Supervisor Holly Mitchell, and that'll be March 9th at 5 p.m. So want to welcome Stephanie Wiggins to Happy Hour. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and here we go. And Metro voted to hire Stephanie as CEO on April 8th of last year. She's a lifelong trailblazer and champion of equity and inclusion. She is the first African-American woman to lead the agency. As CEO of Metro, she oversees an agency that runs the 3rd busiest transit system in the United States and serves as the lead transportation planning, programming, and financing agency for the over 10 million residents of LA County. Before rejoining Metro, where she used to have a role as CEO in June, she previously served for 2.5 years as CEO of Metrolink, the nation's 3rd largest passenger rail system, covering 538 route miles throughout Southern California. With a deep and genuine commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, Stephanie strives to provide all people living in Southern California equal access to mobility to get to work, school, healthcare, and leisure activities. Achieving that goal depends on leading an organization that is as diverse and inclusive as the region it serves. Stephanie, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So first, we want to congratulate you, and I know it's been a little bit, but welcome you to your new role, and just give you space. If you had top 3 priorities that you hope to accomplish in your new role, what would those be?
Wow. Well, I think first of all, the pandemic kind of colors everything that we do, and wanting to make sure as we work with the region on an equitable recovery, we do so in a way that improves the experience for riders and future riders. I think it's incredibly important that we recognize that going back to status quo is not going to work. And so definitely ushering us out of this pandemic is priority number 1. There are a lot of challenges associated with that, the disruptions, I'm sure. This organization has heard of, whether it's our labor shortages, the quality of service, concerns about safety and security, et cetera. But there are some silver linings. Many of you know about the partnership with the city of LA on implementing peak hour bus only lanes. That's been incredible during the pandemic. Implementing Next Gen has been incredible during the pandemic. So one of my key priorities is getting us out of this pandemic, which also has some financial challenges associated with it. I think also really making equity more than a slogan, but making it part of our DNA. And that means really ensuring that we look at equity proactively as part of our decision-making and a reaction to our decision-making. And then my third priority, it may sound hokey, but really, my background, whether it's the Super Bowl, the Olympics, it's all kind of tied up with my moonshot vision that we make Metro the first choice that people think about. And that blows people's minds. But I get excited about that because it means we have to rethink how we deliver our services, the quality of services, the frequency. I loved your icebreaker about your desired BRTs. We've got to be more creative to make sure that we provide a system that is safe, fast, clean, and gets people to where they need to go. So those are my top 3.
Thank you. And it sort of segues into our next question. I mean, headways and service levels have been dramatically scaled back right now, largely due to an operator shortage. What do you think Metro needs to do to get back on track? Is it as simple as increasing operator pay and having the pandemic subside a little more, or is it more complicated than that?
It's more complicated than that, Michael, and the reduction hasn't taken place yet. We will reduce the service temporarily on February 20th. And you might ask, if we know where the cancellations are, why aren't we just adjusting the service now? Well, if we just adjust the service now, which we could do, it just perpetuates the inequities that have been created as a result of the canceled service. So we want to make sure when we implement the service reduction, we are doing it in an equitable way. We're doing it in a way that kind of uses our next gen tiers as the guideline, and that requires us to really think differently about the schedules and have our operators rebid the service, rebid their assignment. So that's why it doesn't, we're choosing not to implement it immediately. That's why February 20th. But the reason why I say that it's not just a matter of we just need to hire more bodies. This pandemic, to me, is more than just a crisis or a moment in time. It is a real disruption, and it has changed everything about how we do our business. And attracting labor and how we think about the positions that we offer is not immune to that. So I think what we're going to find, not unlike other industries, is that we're really going to have to think differently about the work that we're providing, not just wages. Wages are a key thing, but how we structure the work. We now know with the pandemic, more workers are demanding flexibility. And we've got to really just think overall about the package, not only what it's going to take to attract people, but also what it's going to take to retain people. Michael, we're not immune from the Great Resignation either. We also gave golden handshakes as well as a financial measure last year. So I think it's a major disruption, and a disruption just requires that, again, status quo won't do it.
So switching gears, we recently ran some numbers on the environmental impact of Metro's rail, bus, and highway projects over the next couple decades. And Metro is going to spend tens of billions of dollars by 2050 with what is very excitingly the largest rail investment in the country. The rail network plus planned BRT and bus lanes will result in a dramatic reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. However, Metro is also planning on 345 new lane miles of highways. And according to our calculations, the increased greenhouse gas emissions and VMTs from the increased highway projects will not only negate all of the savings from rail and bus, but will actually put us in the hole almost 100% worse than that. So in other words, we're spending billions of dollars to make the traffic and air worse by 2050 simply because of the highway program. I know you've already made some changes with the highway program, but what do you think Metro needs to do with its highway program? And I guess it's a loaded question, but do you think Metro should be in the business of building highways, given everything we know about climate change and rail and bus service and everything else we want to accomplish?
Well, let me say this. While I was at Metrolink, we really wanted to look at our footprint on how we could reduce GHG. And so one of the things that I helped oversee in my role as their CEO is the development of its first ever climate action plan. And I think it's relevant to your question, Michael, because in doing so, we did not, we did not just take calculations of the impact of the ridership, but we also looked at our fleet operations at that time and how we contributed to increased greenhouse gas emissions. We looked at everything that we produce, and then we developed a plan on how to mitigate that. I think the same thing can apply here at Metro. I do know that the board passed a motion to actually ask us to develop an analysis, just like you've talked about. Don't just report out on the anticipated greenhouse gas emission reductions on the transit side, but look at everything that we fund so we can look at it holistically. I think that will be revealing because it will help us, again, have another key factor in decision-making where we make investments. I do think as it relates to highways, a couple of things I would note. SB 743, while it's in the process of being implemented, it does recognize that for projects that are proposed to increase VMT, they have to mitigate that VMT before they can move forward. I think that's an important step. I think the other thing that's important is that our current board chair, Supervisor Hilda Solis, has made it a priority during her term as chair to highlight, among other things, the need to reimagine our highways and what our approach is going to be. Before I even started in this role, in May of last year, you all may recall that the board passed motions to actually suspend the work on the 710 South and the 605 South, which both anticipated widenings, to really take a step back and make sure that we were looking at a comprehensive corridor-wide approach that considered the community impacts more intentionally than we had in the past. Both of those projects have been in the makings for decades. So it was significant that the board unanimously voted to do that. And then, of course, as you all may know, a month later, Caltrans indicated, that they were not going to support signing off on the environmental document for the 710 South. So as a result, we are working with a task force that really has authentic community voices at the table, local electeds, other key stakeholders, so that we can really revisit the approach to dealing with a comprehensive corridor needs rather than looking at just the traditional widening. I do think that's going to be the future. I think we know a lot more now about the impacts of highway projects on communities, air quality, et cetera, than we were ready to recognize 10, 20 years ago. And so I do think we are in the middle of history, and it's not going to be the same.
Do you anticipate Metro taking a position on Assemblymember Garcia's bill?
We are evaluating it right now. We're evaluating it right now. So stay tuned for that. Mhm.
Sounds good. Can you talk a little bit about congestion pricing? This strategy has worked pretty well in other parts of the world, getting people to drive less, take public transportation or bike more. How do you see congestion pricing playing out in the LA area? When do you think it might first be implemented? And also, do individual cities need to opt in, or is Metro in full control? How does that work?
I will tell you my view of congestion pricing is a little bit differently. I'm a little bit biased because of the express lanes on the 110 and 10. That was my entree into Metro. And I was the executive in charge of implementing design and implementing that project. And I really see LA County's first introduction into congestion pricing is through the express lanes. And I think that is meaningful because my goal, November of this year, will be 10 years of operation of the express lanes on the 110. And then February of next year will be 10 years on the 10. We have distributed over 1.3 million transponders to LA County residents. And and with those transponders, what it really means is that we have a market penetration where LA County residents more often than not now have gotten used to the tolling and congestion pricing. And within the last 4 years, you don't even need to open an account to actually access those lanes. So I really think that is a real example of what the more traditional cordon congestion pricing can mean for LA County. The net toll revenue from the express lanes is reinvested in the corridors in which they operate, community-related investments. It really helps spearhead a lot of active transportation projects. So as we now have been studying, the more traditional cordon type of congestion pricing through the traffic reduction study, we are at the point where we're doing initial technical evaluation. We'll have some status community meetings later this month. But it will be interesting. I've been in this role for 7 months. In my briefings, it's never been presented to me from a position where Metro will dictate. What I know from being the executive in charge of the express lanes, we have to work together with the cities. And preliminarily, we know that Culver City, at a minimum, has expressed interest in working with us to develop a concept for a potential pilot. So I think particularly with pricing types of initiatives, we really want to go in there in partnership to pilot these types of strategies. And again, I think because of the near 10-year success of the express lanes, it bodes well for at least some type of multiple pilot program within LA County.
Great. So that segues nicely into the next question, which is Metro working with cities. In your view, how can Metro accomplish all of its projects, especially its BRT projects and last mile planning projects, when it's at the mercy of local jurisdictions that may or may not want these things? Particularly, I'm thinking about the node of Pasadena BRT right now. We're monitoring situations in Burbank and things going on. You also released very ambitious first mile, last mile plans for the future Purple Line stations, which I personally loved, which the city of Los Angeles is not committed to necessarily implementing. So, what is that balance, and how do we get improvements that benefit everybody, like a BRT, if individual cities opt out or water it down?
It's really interesting because the cities have the land use authority. Metro does not. I don't really think Metro should have land use authority, but it does require us to really think differently on how we work with the cities to accomplish our goals. I've been in transportation for almost 30 years, and I've worked in LA County since 2008, and it's an extremely challenging environment. And now it's interesting, now that I'm in this lead role, what am I going to do differently? Because we have a relationship with the Council of Governments. which are those entities to represent all of the 88 cities. We provide the city's local return from the various sales tax measures. And I really think strategically, I'm going to be making changes internally to really beef up our relationships and engagements with our cities, right? Because I think one of our challenges has been really trying to understand what are the city's goals and how we can communicate with them in such a way that they understand that these should be shared goals. Our goals should be shared goals because we are part of the city. And too often we're treated like a developer, a for-profit developer at that. So, you know, it has been amazing what's happened during the pandemic, working with the city of Los Angeles, but they're one of 88 cities that I need to deal with. And so we are using that as a model to see how we can work with cities. Part of it is two things. Making sure they have the technical capacity to prioritize this. Secondly, what we've been doing for about almost 10 years, we have been providing a grant program to encourage cities to update their general plans to be more supportive of transit. That has met with some success, but I think we need to do more. So it is a goal of mine to really improve the partnerships with the cities. One of the things that we'll be publishing this year is our 5-year quality of life report that will look at what types of investments have been made over the last 5 years since Measure M, since we first started receiving the first dollar from Measure M sales tax. And I'm hoping that as a result of this analysis, this also gives a platform for me to go back to the cities to talk about, are we actually realizing the outcomes that we intended? And if not, how do we course correct to make sure we're really making the most out of the taxpayer dollars?
If despite Metro's best intentions and asking and pleading and showing data and everything else, a city decides, for example, the BRT line, you know, we want to just be, we're not comfortable with the trade-offs. The bus can go on our streets, but it doesn't get any sort of priority or special space.
Yeah.
What does Metro do? I mean, I know that's not a perfect answer, but what is your view about BRT and cities' abilities to, I guess, take the R out of the BRT?
The R out of the BRT. Yes. You know, fundamentally, at the end of the day, Metro has a responsibility as a mobility provider. And we also have an ordinance passed by the voters where, you know, there are some expectations. In this case, we have the opportunity to environmentally clear a BRT, recognizing to implement it, the city still has the authority as to when and where it can be implemented. So, you know, I've, again, been around for almost 3 decades. I think it's in the best interest of the agency to at least complete the environmental process and get a project cleared, and then be committed to continuing to work with the various cities on addressing their needs. But there's no doubt the checks and balance is, you know, the city ultimately has to approve permits, has to approve permitting, et cetera.
So switching gears to Metro Bike Share, it's often been kind of an afterthought in the past. And with the average trip in LA County being about 3 miles and 2/3 being under 5 miles, we see a tremendous opportunity for bikes, and especially Metro's rolling out electric bikes and bike share to fill key gaps in first last mile or even as transportation modes by themselves with no other Metro mode. What do you see for the future of Metro's bike share program? Do you see it expanding? And if so, how soon could it expand to have really good density across the county?
First of all, I would say, I think the future of bike share at Metro is bright. In particular, you know, the pandemic highlighted the increase in usage of bicycling as a mode. We are going through the process of, again, revisiting how do we deliver the most effective bike share program for the region, and one that will facilitate rapid expansion of bike share where communities want it. And Michael, right now, the current construct of our bike share model is one that does not invite rapid expansion. So that's why we're revisiting that. We also, internally, I announced a realignment and I shifted bike share from our real estate and parking group, done a great job, but I've moved them over to a newly formed shared mobility group, which where, transit operations is housed, Metro Micro is housed, and really want to ensure that we're getting synergy with all of these operational options that we're providing riders. So fundamentally, we've got to change that structure so that it is more attractive for cities and communities to want to expand. Secondly, there's actually going to be an item before the board this month to award a contract to a team that will actually upgrade our bicycle parking program, right? The bicycle parking facilities, the process to reserve bicycle space, it's very cumbersome. It doesn't lend itself to be more attractive and flexible to the cyclist needs. So we have an item on the board this month to contract with a firm that will do a wholesale redo to upgrade, automate certain aspects of our bicycle parking program to make it more attractive because it's part of our future.
So we've been pretty active lately on the Sepulveda Pass project. And as Kyle mentioned, we recently joined the Sepulveda Transit Corridor for All coalition along with UCLA and other local leaders, advocating for heavy rail through the Sepulveda Pass and UCLA stop. To us, it makes sense that Metro would choose a technology that's compatible with other things that it's doing on its other lines. It's also the quickest. I'm sure you can't comment on monorail versus heavy rail, but I guess the question is, what are your thoughts on consistency of technology across Metro system, rail system? And what are your thoughts on this project, if you can share anything?
I'm just thinking about what I can say so I don't get in trouble with my community outreach folks. We're still in the scoping period. Let me just generally say that, first of all, I applaud the engagement and active engagement. I want to lift up with, I think the gentleman's name was Kyle, and his report out. Really important for us to hear from the community and stakeholders about what you expect and what you want to see. It's critically important. It does impact our decision making. When the comment period closes on February 11th, I know from a briefing I received from my team just yesterday that we've already received over 2,000 comments. And usually when someone comments, they don't just comment about one thing. So it's probably going to exponentially grow. We anticipate being able to report out to the community on those comments later this year, probably the end of the summer or so. So stay tuned for that. Without commenting specifically on Sepulveda, because not only do we have an environmental process where we don't want to prejudge the alternatives, we also have this public-private partnership element where we have firms competing on certain alternatives. I will say that, as I look at the mobility needs of this region, I do think one of the things we have to keep in mind, and I'm grateful that Measure M and the ordinance, we actually did anticipate, and as a result, we are required per our Measure M ordinance to every 10 years, take a look at what is forecast out in the future. It really does give us an opportunity to recognize that the environment may change, circumstances may change, technology may change, and it could impact our assumptions of the mobility needs. I mean, we've all known that telecommuting has been a tool for at least a couple of decades, but there really wasn't widespread acceptance about that as a real workplace option that could have a positive impact on congestion, can speed up bus service, et cetera. And now we know because of this pandemic, telecommuting in a significant way is here to stay, right? So I will just generally say, I am a person who believes in not only just acknowledging best practices, but we also need to periodically take a look and assess whether or not it still is the most, not only most cost-effective way, but when we talk about transportation, I don't think of us as just being here to move people from point A to point B. We know that when we talk about transportation, we're talking about health, we're talking about access to jobs, access to education. And if we can facilitate delivering that sooner to the communities in which we operate, I'm going to look at all types of alternatives, including technology. How's that?
Great. Thank you.
Circling the wagon. Okay, go ahead.
Circling the wagon. If you want to get in trouble with your communications
I do
people,
not
you're
want
welcome
to
to
get
make
in
some
trouble.
breaking news here.
No.
Okay. So let's go to some audience questions. There are quite a few. I'm going to go
Okay.
ahead and make this full
Uh-oh.
screen again. And I think you already talked about this, but it was about bicycle parking at metro stations. I think you already said you are planning a study to implement better
Yes.
bicycle parking.
Yep, going to the board later this month.
Okay, that's an easy answer.
Okay.
Question about automated camera enforcement for bus lanes.
Yeah.
Will it expand to other cities?
I just don't know. Can I get back to you, Michael, on that?
Sure, or
We'd
get back
love
to
it
David.
too. We'd love it too. Probably the natural, because they partnered with us in getting that bill sponsored that got passed into law last year, but we'll get back to you on that. I got some of my team members on who are listening.
Sounds good.
So, okay.
Katrina wants to know what's different about leading Metro versus Metrolink.
Oh my God, everything, Katrina. It's been a privilege. I do believe every experience prepares you for the next. And while they're very different agencies, Metrolink had about 300 employees. Metro has 11,000 employees. But Metrolink's span was over 6 counties, right? The longer distance commuter. And Metro's has a smaller geographic area, but carries exponentially millions more people. During my time at Metrolink, prior to the pandemic, we had the highest ridership ever in a 12-month period. It was 12 million people. Well, Metro was carrying 1.2 million a day. But you could still learn things. You learn the importance of Metrolink being a backbone and the transfers and the connections with the connecting transit are so critical. The importance of seamlessness, the importance of VMT and what you can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I see Christine Mills is on this call. She gave me a PhD in community, active, authentic engagement, and what it means to be a good neighbor. So there are tremendous things that I've learned in both. I think we both need each other. And I feel fortunate to be in this role because now I can also uplift Metrolink's needs as well as Metro's needs.
Next question about real-time arrival signs. They often are
God.
wrong.
I can't.
Is this something that's on your radar, and what could be done to fix it?
I thought someone asked you to cherry pick my questions. This should have been cherry picked. No, this is a problem, Mr. Fenn. Yes. So I am working with our IT team to really try to figure out what is the cause and how come we can't get this right. So I still have 6 more months into my first 12-month term. So hold me to it. Can I come back to Streets for All when I've got this fixed?
Anytime. You're welcome.
Okay.
Next question.
I'm not giving up. I think the key is, David, I'm not giving up.
Next question is about trees. So this is news to me, but Metro, according to this person, is removing 174 trees along the 91 freeway, removing shade trees on Wilshire for the Purple Line station, and it takes decades to get them back to providing shade. Is it possible to do a better job with trees?
Yes, I'm not sure if we have a tree policy, so I would have to, research that. But generally, my understanding, the expectation is 2 for 1, because of the amount of time it takes to grow back the shade and what it means for climate, et cetera. But I know Heather's on. You'll make a note of this, Heather, and we can get back to you, Michael. I'm not.
I will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Eric wants to know, how many public restrooms should every metro station have?
Oh my God, Eric. This goes with the information signage issue. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge. Ideally, we'd like them at every station. And there are trade-offs with that. And that has been the challenge. And to the person, Lois, yes, when we do relocate them, I'm sorry, we don't destroy them. We work with a local nonprofit on what to do with the trees. So we do not destroy the trees. I do know that for a fact. But Eric, yes, we should have them everywhere. There are trade-offs.
Something conspicuous for anonymous. How can an LA City Council member work with you to accelerate the many parts of the mobility plan, and which parts of the plan would you prioritize? I'm assuming this is referring to the City of Los Angeles mobility plan.
Oh, I have to say I'm not familiar with the City of Los Angeles's mobility plan, so I'm not sure how we can, where we can be of service there, but of course we'd want to. I'm not familiar with it enough.
It's full of 207 miles of bus lanes, which.
Oh, well, we love it. We've got dedicated staff that work with LADOT's dedicated staff to identify areas and work to get these approved. And again, I'd lift up what we've been doing during the pandemic. It's a model and it's working. And in fact, I think we're opening La Brea in a couple of months. So we also provide funding through the sales tax measures to the cities that help with, that high injury network item that you highlighted. So we also provide funding to the cities directly to help them.
So we covered this a little bit, but how easy or difficult is it for you to make progress on your goals, to make Metro the #1 choice for people when it involves working with so many agencies? And I think the most important thing here is, how can we as citizens help?
One, I want you to know that your voice does matter. Your earlier questions, Michael, about what do you do about the cities who may not want to permit some things? They hear from their constituents, their residents. It makes a difference. Not only at City Council, but also at the Metro Board and our committees and at our community meetings. On one hand, working with a lot of different agencies, communities and jurisdictions, it's a challenge. But what I know for sure is if you do the hard work up front, the diversity of opinion, the diversity of different voices, you actually end up with a better product than only dealing with one agency and not considering the different needs. The reality is we've got 88 cities. They all have different needs. And we get better when we're listening to multiple players rather than just trying to limit the voices that we have involved in it.
Question about fare-free transit. Is Metro exploring eliminating or reducing fares on public transit to encourage increased use? I know Metro did have fare-free transit and it recently got reinstated, but do you see that changing?
Yes, so we have reduced fares on our system. We right now have a 6-month half off discount going on all of our passes, and we will evaluate that prior to the end of the 6 months and make a recommendation to our board as to whether or not that 50% discount should remain permanent. In the meantime, yes, while we did resume fare collection on January 10th, we have chosen to take a phased approach to fareless. We're starting with K through 14. So we launched a fareless program, K through 12 and community colleges. That pilot program will go on for 2 years. In the meantime, for low-income adults, we do have the deep discount program. We continue to advocate at the congressional and state level for funding to support our fareless program. I have also initiated a zero-based budgeting exercise as we develop our FY23 budget to make sure we're optimizing the money that we have. But we have not given up on fareless transit. It's just, in my opinion, it's in the best interest of this agency to implement fareless transit in a staged approach.
Question about public safety. What is your plan for helping people that are suffering from mental illness, and I guess just safety in general on Metro? I've also seen some questions about armed enforcement, police on trains. Some people feel safer, some people feel less safe. What's your point of view?
You know, it's a significant issue. My plan is to bring forward a framework for reimagining public safety that really has to address all of those concerns, because I have to be responsible for employees and riders' safety. And we know that safety and security means different things to different people. So working with PSAC, as well as our team internally, and taking into account, again, survey responses that we received from our riders and the public, as well as our employees, you know, my goal is to implement a plan that really ensures that we have a layered approach to public safety, particularly the question on the slide about mental health illness. We now are working closely with the Department of Mental Health at the county to really access resources that are specific to mental health and to get more of that type of crisis response support on our system. We also are looking at expanding our relationships and partnerships with homeless outreach providers. We are looking at even something as innovative of working with students while they're pursuing their graduate program in sociology, mental health, et cetera, to actually be responders on our system as well as they work to get their class credit. That's a pilot program that's going on in Philadelphia right now with my sister transit agency and a local university, and we want to try to implement that here as well. So it's very multifaceted. We are in the process of implementing it, and I plan on reporting out on that later this month as well.
Question about the modernizing highway program that the motion passed the board to make funds available to be spent on active transportation projects. I guess the question is, how will it, and what do you expect that impact to be?
I'm sorry, Michael, I didn't get your question. Is how will it?
How will it, and what do you expect the impact to be moving funds from the highway program to transit and active transportation?
There'll be a standard process. First of all, let me just say the Measure M as well as Measure R, the two most recent sales tax initiatives that have been passed by LA County residents, they actually have specific provisions that allow, during, again, certain milestones, for the board to decide to shift funding from highway to transit. This modernizing the Metro Highway program that passed last year really is symbolic of that by being explicit about active transportation. So as our Council of Governments, our process, generally speaking, is that these highway program funds are really within the purview of the Council of Governments, and they have to present, their plans and they present them to Metro for review and approval. And so this modernizing the highway program policy is really directing staff that as these cities bring forward their project proposals, they include active transportation, they're eligible, and they will be vetted and move forward to our full board for approval. So it's a new, Michael, it's a new policy. So I imagine you'll start seeing that come through within the next few months.
We're getting down to the probably last question, maybe two.
Okay.
Do you take transit as part of your own commute? And do you have a favorite metro line?
Yes, I do. In fact, I just moved downtown a few months ago, so I could be closer to the transit line. My favorite, I'm biased, maybe Silver Line, because of my role with the express lanes. What we did with the express lanes is we made that more BRT-like. We actually improved ridership and saw a shift in riders on the Silver Line after we implemented the pricing. So that's my favorite, but yes, I'm downtown, so I can do subway or the Silver Line.
Last question about electric buses. How did it go on the G line, and what's the outlook for getting to 100% zero emissions by 2030?
G line was our first. We're still learning. You know, there have been some challenges as with any new technology, but overall, you know, working with our the bus manufacturer, we are optimistic about that technology, so much so that last year, as a result of our initial experience on the G line, we went to the board and recommended approval of funding for the Silver Line, which is next. And so we've committed to that. The outlook for achieving 100% zero emissions fleet by 2030, let me just say it's better than it was when I started in June. And when I say it's better, the new infrastructure law identifies funding to promote zero emission buses and the infrastructure needed for zero emission buses. And last month with Governor Newsom's budget announcement, his proposal included specific funding for zero emission buses. So it's promising, but you know, we still have a heavy lift. We think we need about $1 billion more to meet our 2030 goal, not to mention the timeline, you know, the type of infrastructure improvements that are needed to meet 2030. It's a very tight schedule, even if we had all of the money today. So it's still a focus of ours, but it's very challenging without a strong federal and state commitment on closing that funding gap.
We saw Metro's recent letter to the governor kind of going for the gold with the budget surplus. So
that's right, golden opportunity. That's right.
Well, we're over time, actually. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your time and for answering all these questions and so many different topics. We really appreciate it. And thanks to our audience. Hope to see everybody again next month for our conversation with Supervisor Mitchell. So have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.